Hello, I'm Stuart Winter, the platform architect and developer for Slackware on the ARM platform. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through installing Slackware onto a RockPro64. Before we get started, I just want to say a big thanks to the Pine64 company for supporting the project by providing hardware that's been used to develop Slackware on the ARch64 platform. Okay, so let's begin. Go to arm.slackware.com. Click on the installation link in the left-hand side menu. Then click on the Slackware ARch64 current link for the development branch. Then click on the RockPro64 instructions link. This brings you to the installation documents for the RockPro64. Take your time to familiarise yourself with this before you install because it will help you, particularly the hardware requirements. Some of them are required and some of them there are optional, so you do need to make yourself familiar with that. So we have the list of hardware on the website, and I'm just going to walk you through what we're going to be doing in this installation video here. So we've got the 4GB version of the RockPro64. We have the CPU cooling fan, to which I've already attached the heat transfer pad to the base of. We've got the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth module here. This is optional, the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi module, but I have one, so I'll be attaching it in this video. We've also got the micro SD card there, if you pan over here. We have an SSD drive here, which will house the operating system. And we've got the USB to SATA adapter here, and I've got Ethernet, which is connected to my network where I have a working DHCP server, and I've got my HDMI cable that's attached to my HDMI monitor, and I've got an adapter here, USB adapter for my micro SD card, which I'm going to be putting into the laptop. Okay, so let's attach the peripherals to the board. So the first thing I'll do is attach the CPU cooling fan. So as I said, I've already attached the transfer material, and as you can see, I've already had this on here, as you've got the indentation mark there. This is really easy to do. So you see there are two holes here that you can see in the board. You can see, well, actually there are three there. The fan uses two of them. So it's very simple. We just simply, these are on a spring. These are on a spring here. So you simply position that there, and you may hear that click. That one's in. And likewise with the other one. Click, it's in. And then they're firmly secured at the bottom here with that one and that one. Then let's attach the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth module. So this only goes one way round, as you can see, because of the size and the location of the pins. So let's put that on. Okay, and then just gently push it in till it's secure. Done. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is connect up the network. So let's plug that in. Then we are going to connect the USB port up. This is going to go into the USB 3 ports, which is the blue coloured one here. So let's plug that in there. Let's plug in the SD drive as well. Okay, that's in. Okay, and then you can see here I just need to finally connect up the fan. So I'll plug the fan into the power port there. Okay. So, and then I will connect in the HDMI monitor cable. There we go. And then the USB keyboard. So I'll just pop that in there. Okay. Okay, so that's the board assembled there. Returning to the documentation now, at the software and network environment setup, the first thing we're going to do is create a directory into which we will download all of our Slackware assets. So we'll make that directory now and then cd into it. The next thing is to import the Slackwarearm Gpg key so that we can verify the assets have been signed by the Slackwarearm project. There we go. That's imported. Next, select the Slackware version that we're going to download. So just paste that into the shell. Then select the server that we're going to download the assets from. Next, we're going to download the bootloader assets. Now we're going to download the Slackware installer. Okay. Now we're going to download a verification tool. Now we're going to download the Slackware RockPro64 tree. So this will take a while. Next, we're going to verify the verification tool that we've downloaded. We're looking for good signature from Slackwarearm here. Next, we're going to run that verification tool, which will verify everything else that we've downloaded. If the tool detects any errors with the signatures, it will abort, so you can see where the problems are. If you do have any problems, the first port of call is to re-download and try again. But if you do still find any problems, let us know on the forum. As you can see here, the tool exited successfully with 0 bad signatures, so it's all good. Next, we're going to elevate our privileges to root on the Linux host computer so that we can write the assets to the microSD card. So su-, type in a password. Then we're going to use the dmessage tool to print out the kernel ring buffer. This is the easiest way to see what's been inserted into the computer because the drivers will emit messages to the kernel ring buffer. It's easier than using lsblk, which you see in the documentation. It's just another way of doing it. Okay, so now I'm going to put the micro SD card into my USB adapter and put it into my Linux host laptop in order to transfer the initial version of the bootloader onto the micro SD card so we can get started. So follow me over and let's just put that into the laptop. Okay, we're now going to run dmessage again to see what block device the micro SD card has been assigned. So we can see that it's SDB and it happens to have one partition already on that. Next, we're going to change into my home directory where the assets have been downloaded to. Okay. Now we're going to just clear some space off the micro SD card to remove any partitions that may have been there from previous use. You can see just for safety I've prepended the line with a hash before I pasted it in. Okay, so we're going to change SDC from the documentation to SDB to reflect what we have on this machine. And then we'll hit enter. Okay, that's done. Next, we need to unpack and dump that bootloader to the same SDB block device. There we go, done. Then we're going to type in sync to synchronize the data so we can safely remove the USB adapter from the Linux host machine. Okay, now I've transferred the initial bootloader onto the micro SD card, so it's time to pop that into the board. Okay, so you hear a nice click in there. Okay, so at this point I've inserted the micro SD card with the initial bootloader code on it into the RockPro64. For the first stage, we're going to flash this bootloader code into the SPI flash of the RockPro64. To do that, we take a jumper and bridge pins 23 and 25. So there we go, that's that. Okay, now I'm going to power on the RockPro64. I'm going to connect the power and then press the power button for 2 beats and that will turn it on. So connect that in, 1, 2. Okay, to the left. Okay, you can see at this point the RockPro, it's just waiting for a couple of seconds. I've just disconnected the jumper cable. You can just about make it out on the screen here. It's erased the SPI flash and now it's written it. And the process is complete. Okay, so the initial bootloader code has been written to the SPI flash so we can power the board down. So if you just hold it down for about 8 seconds and the board will power off. Okay, right, that's that part of it done. The next thing is we need to deploy the Slackware installer onto this micro SD card. So we'll do this again. We'll just quickly pop that into there and then follow me over, and then let's put that in our laptop. Okay, so run dmessage again and you'll see that again it's SDB. But this time there are 3 partitions. That's simply because the bootloader image has 3 partitions on it. Then what we need to do is go back to the documentation and then look at the section here that tells us how to copy that Slackware installer image to there. So we're going to unpack that now, again onto the SDB block device. And then run sync again to synchronize it, and then we can log out of root. Next, we need to know the IP address of our Linux host machine. So type hostname-I and make a note of the IP because you'll need it later when you're in the Slackware installer. Next, change into the directory where you downloaded the Slackware tree. Okay. Then start the simple HTTP server from within your home directory. So just copy that, paste it in and hit enter. This takes a moment to start. Okay, it's now serving on your local network on port 8000. Okay, so I've copied the Slackware installer onto the micro SD card and now it's time to boot the installer. So let's put that micro SD card into there. Wrong way around. Okay, gently push it in. And again, to turn it on, it's just hold the power button, 1, 2. You can see the board, the lights light up there. If you pan back now to the screen. Okay. The installer is just loading off the micro SD card. Okay, pan down. Okay, as you can see, the installer has now loaded and the CPU fan has started. Okay. Okay, so you can see on the screen that it's telling me to enter to activate the console. So let's do that. And I get to load a key map. I'm in the UK, so I'm going to select a UK key map. Okay. We're going to set the clock on this machine over NTP and then write it to the system's RTC. But because this machine doesn't have a battery backup, the time will be lost when we power down the machine. Then we're going to use fdisk to create the partitions. So we'll just run through the instructions here. So first of all, we'll open it up with fdisk, then print the partition table. You'll see that we don't currently have one, so let's create it. So we'll create a primary partition of 4 GB for the swap partition, and then create a second partition for the root file system. So just follow the instructions. There we go. This one already had a partition from before. I didn't fully clean the disk, so I just say yes here. Then I set partition 2 to be bootable, have one last look, looks good, and then write the partition table to the SSD drive. Then just use fdisk to see what the partition table looks like. Okay, it looks good. Next, type in setup to load up the setup menu. Then move to add swap. Click OK. press no. Okay. Then select SDA2 and format it as ext4. The next question is about resizing. Generally just say yes unless you want to do anything funky with the microSD card. This will now resize the /boot partition to the full extent of the microSD card. So in my case it's about 60 gigabytes. It'll then just do a little bit of setup to configure the bootloader. Okay. Now install from an FTP or HTTP server. Type in http:// the IP address of your Linux host machine that you noted down earlier, port 8000. Type /Slackware and hit enter. Couple of checks. Looks good. And now it'll process the package tree. This will take several minutes. Okay. The recommendation is to install all of the packages. So just do that and then click on the terse option and leave it to install. This will typically take about an hour to fully install. All of the packages have now installed and we're in the final post-installation setup routine, where we'll run through various dialogues to configure your system. The first is around what you want to do with the console messages. If you plan on using the UART or the serial console, you should leave it here as the default, which is no. However, for this machine, I will only use an HDMI monitor, so I want all the console messages onto the HDMI monitor. So I'm going to pick yes. The next is about installing a bootloader. If this is the first time you're installing Slackware, you must say yes here because this will install the latest version of the bootloader code into the SPI flash. The latest version of the bootloader code is included within the installer, but it is not on the initial flashing that we did at the start of this tutorial. So again, you should always install the latest version of the bootloader code. Okay, next you should remove the Slackware installer. We don't need it. I'm now going to pick the default mouse configuration. Configure our network. I'll call my machine RockPro64. And I'll put it within the domain example.com. Use Network Manager here. Yes, it's correct. Okay. I'm going to choose to load rc.rpc, which enables me to use NFS. You don't have to do that, but I'm going to. Yes, we do want to choose some custom screen fonts. This is simply to make it legible on the screen, otherwise it's a little bit small. So pick TER732B, that's a good one. Setting the clock, I always say no here, and I pick Europe/London. So you can pick your own local time zone. Next, I always pick the default here for Vi. I'm going to pick XFCE. And now we can set the root password. So type in your root password. Okay. Go down to exit, press OK. Now there's a couple of options here. If you want to make any modifications to the operating system before you boot, you can pick shell. But we can use reboot now. Okay, so the machine's going to reboot now, and you should be able to see it coming up on the screen. One of the things that you'll notice is that the screen does blank at certain points. That's okay, it's to be expected. The operating system is now booting off of, it's loading the kernel and the initial RAM disk off of the micro SD card, and at which point it will then pivot into the operating system proper on the hard drive. So again, you'll see that the screen has gone blank. This will light up again in a few moments and you'll see the operating system booting. And there we go. So this is the first boot, so it's going to take slightly longer than usual by maybe an extra minute or something like that, just while it configures the SSH keys and a few other initial first boot activities. And there we go. It's booted. So I'm just going to log in here. Okay, so I'm just going to add myself a user. So I'll make my Moses user as I always do. Okay, set up myself a password there. Okay, so let's just switch over to another virtual console and log in as my new user and run startx. Now I've configured XFCE here because it's a nice lightweight desktop that's very functional. You can use KDE if you prefer. And here we go. XFCE is running on the RockPro64. Now I'll just load up the Firefox web browser. And there is Firefox. Yes, this is a good point. So you'll see that the clock is wrong. That's because I don't have, on this particular RockPro64, I don't have the battery backup. So let's just quickly change the clock. So I'm going to set the clock via NTP from a public NTP server. Okay. And there we go. Finally, we need to close that HTTP server that we opened earlier. So return to the Linux host computer and Control-C the web server. And that's it. So as you can see, it's really straightforward to install Slackware onto a RockPro64. The only thing that's left to do is to follow the rest of the documentation with the post-installation setup and have a look and see if there are any workarounds for any known bugs and that kind of thing. And that's it. Have fun.